Why is it that bedtime, of all moments in the day, can feel like the one that breaks us? So maybe you know this feeling, okay? You've held it together all day. You've pushed through meltdowns, demands, decisions, sensory chaos, and the constant emotional labor of parenting a PDA or high needs child. And by the time bedtime comes around, your body is just done. Okay. You're thinking, if I can just get them to sleep, I can finally breathe. Okay. But instead of winding down, your child ramps up. They get silly, hyper, clingy, chaotic, resistant, or they just completely shut down and don't listen to you at all. Okay. They feel you pulling away inside because you've reached your capacity, even if you're trying to hide it. And their system grabs on tighter. And suddenly you're in that familiar spiral, the rushing, the pressure, the time urgency, the guilt for wanting space, the shame for getting triggered, the exhaustion of feeling like every night is a battle that you never wanted to have. If this is you, you're not alone and you're not failing. Okay, in today's episode, we're going to talk about why bedtime is so triggering, not just for your child, but for your nervous system too. We'll explore why PDA and high needs kids struggle so much with the separation of sleep, what happens inside your nervous system that makes bedtime the hardest moment of the day, and the small shifts that help both your nervous system and your child's nervous system feel safer and softer and more connected at night. So by the end of this episode, you'll understand bedtime in a totally new way, I hope, and one that brings compassion, clarity, and a lot more possibility for peaceful evenings. So let's dive in. So I remember a time where I dreaded bedtime. Okay. So at that time, we had mostly gotten my son to sleep on his own. And what we would do is we would lay beside him, he would fall asleep, and then we'd be able to leave the room. And sometimes he'd wake up in the night, we'd come back, lay beside him, fall asleep, we'd leave the room. Okay. But then as he was growing and going through certain changes in his system, things started to change. For example, he had more stress at school and he had a trauma at school where he felt like he was being bullied. Then OCD tendencies started to develop. Okay, then there were challenges at home with his dad's health. And before we knew it, we were back to co-sleeping with him. Okay, so we have spent years on and off co-sleeping, and my son is now 17. Okay, but at this time, bedtime was starting to get later and later. Okay, and it was getting harder for him to go to sleep, which meant that I didn't get my downtime and I desperately needed that, okay, to regenerate. So I would push hard all day to get all the things done, manage the meltdowns, hold it together, and then evening would come around and I would start going into anticipation of how will this night go? And all the worries started mounting. So, the worries like, how will I get him to sleep earlier? How will I get the sleep that I desperately need to feel okay? So I can manage all of the challenges the next day. Okay, I already knew my nervous system needs a lot of sleep to feel regulated. So there were worries also of how do I stay regulated then? And I didn't want to be dysregulated with him, right? It's the irony in all of this. Sleep was a master regulator for me. And here I was worrying about sleep, dysregulating myself. Okay. So I would be mounting stress load before the bedtime process even started. My son could feel this. Okay. But he wasn't reacting yet. But as the bedtime routine went on, I would find myself speeding up a bit, trying to get through all of the steps a little bit faster. And he could feel that I wasn't fully present. And I was just thinking of how to get through this. Okay. And then he would feel that and he would activate and he would start doing silly things to try to get me back into presence. Okay. But it didn't land with me. And all I could think of was how I wanted my space to rest and get this task done. Okay. So that I could feel done for the day. So then he activated even more. Okay. Then I would try to hold in my frustration. Okay. Because my frustration would start mounting at this point. And he felt me clamping down on that frustration. Okay. Then he would activate more and throw something or start running around banging things. And then I would feel this drop of exasperation, desperateness. How am I going to get this child to bed? But I would try to hold it in, acting like I was calm, this pretend calm that comes in that I wasn't even conscious of, right? But meanwhile, all this stress energy was building inside my system, getting ready to erupt. And then he threw the soap bottle and it broke and it made a mess everywhere, all over the floor that I now had to clean up. And you know how hard it is to clean up soap off a floor? Okay. It's like you got to go like many rounds of cleaning it so that it doesn't stay slippery. Okay. So what happened here? I was like, great, yet another thing to do. Okay. So my system just erupted. I started yelling and screaming and then frantically cleaning up the soapy mess so he wouldn't slip and hurt himself. And then this was just like the last straw, right, for me that night. I was so tired. I had pushed through all day and now I had to clean up a big mess. And once I reacted to my son and to the situation, of course, he went into an even bigger reaction. Okay. And suffice it to say, that night was a disaster with me going to sleep at 1 a.m. Okay. And I can't tell you how many nights like this we have had. Okay. So why was bedtime such a huge battle? And why is it for many parents? Okay. When we zoom out and look at bedtime through a nervous system lens, for both the PDA high needs child and the parent, it becomes much clearer. Okay, so let's look first at why our PDA or high needs kids struggle at bedtime. And some of you probably know some of this, okay? Or maybe all of it, but let's see, okay? But I feel like it's really powerful to name this clearly, make it more explicit, and really understand what could be going on in their nervous systems, okay? So we're going to look at this from a nervous system lens and what's happening in their nervous system so that we can bring in what's called context, which is one of the things the nervous system needs to feel safe, right? Context, choice, and connection. Those are the three things the nervous system needs to feel safe. So context, if we understand what's going on with them, we have that context, we can hold more compassion for what shows up on the surface as like, quote unquote, negative behavior. Okay, so number one, for our kids, transitions are hard. So most of us know that, right? But transitioning from being awake and active to resting and sleeping is a big nervous system shift, okay? For PDA autistic or highly sensitive kids, they often have a harder time with nervous system state changes in general, okay? Especially like coming down to the more relaxed state. Their systems don't glide between on and off easily, okay? It can feel more like slamming on the brakes, and then it can feel like a demand too. So even if bedtime looks simple on the outside, like, okay, pajamas, brushing teeth, the story, lights out, can be so simple for some parents, right? That's the frustrating part for us. But for our kids, like internally, it's a massive transition, right? And transitions tend to activate their survival system. So number two, and this is a super important one to understand, is that bedtime is separation. Okay, but let's understand this from a nervous system lens and how it activates the internal alarm system of our kids, okay? So Gordon Neufeld, okay, he's a child development and attachment expert, and he talks a lot about separation being the number one, so separation from the caregiver being the greatest cause of alarm and anxiety in children, okay? So bedtime is a form of separation, and that separation is automatically going to activate the alarm system in your child, especially if they're younger, okay? But I'm going to say it's not only about being younger, it's about how well developed their nervous system is in terms of being able to bring safety on board and regulating themselves, okay? Because this is about being able to regulate themselves when they're separate from you. But bedtime is a form of separation, okay? It's separation from you, separation into the dark, separation into sleep, like an unknown state, separation from the safety of your nervous system, right? And we know for like our PDA kids, a lot of them need constant nervous system scaffolding and another regulated human nearby to feel safe. Okay, you need to feel safe to sleep. right? So this separation can feel especially threatening. And and again, I'm going to say it's not about their age, it's how well developed their nervous system is, their safety system, and their emotional regulation capacity. Okay. So many of us still sleep with our kids when they're tweens or even teens. Like I know I did, and there's no shame in this. Even though our conditioning may tell us there is something wrong with this, there's really nothing wrong with this. Okay, so the third thing about our kids is that coming down into rest can trigger the release of bottled up stress. So this one is super important to understand, okay? So what happens with our kids throughout the day? So depending on if they're going to school or not, but either way, our kids can hold in a lot of their stress throughout the day, okay? Especially if they're in school or in any kind of a demanding environment where they're masking. So masking is not regulation, right? It's activation underneath that's clamped down on, okay? And they may be just trying to cope or just trying to get through the day. But also for those of our kids who stay home and they may be on devices more, so their activation's happening inside on the device, but they're not moving to get it out, right? Or maybe they're not doing a lot of movement. Or when other siblings come home, they have to share your attention with their siblings, okay, in the evenings, or they get sensory overload from their siblings in the early evenings, before bedtime. Okay, so all of that is like mounting stress load, and then maybe they're not like having many meltdowns or releasing. And then at night, when you have your time together and you're helping them to come into, to slow down, the environment is quieter, you're helping their nervous system to come into like more of a slower state, more of a rest state, right? Then their nervous system may come into that state briefly only to be like, oh, I have all this stress energy that I need to let go from the day, and now it's safe enough to let this go, okay? So everything they were holding in from the day, and now they have your one-on-one attention at bedtime, their system now wants to let it go because they're in the presence of your safety. So the letting go, it often doesn't look calm, right? Because it's trapped sympathetic stress energy that needs to be released. And it can look like getting hyper, or becoming silly or wild, or picking fights or bouncing off the walls, So this is the body trying to release sympathetic activation that was bottled up all day. Okay, so it's not them trying to be difficult, it's a nervous system offloading stress, okay, once they feel safer. Okay, so number 4 for our kids, they sense your need for space and it feels like a threat. Okay, so even if you don't say it out loud, your child can feel when you're done for the day and you just want it to be over and your mind is already in my time, I want my time, and you're worried about tomorrow's functioning, right? Like the timing, everyone needs to get to sleep and you're worried about tomorrow's functioning of them and especially of them and perhaps yourself. So PDA, kids and sensitive kids, they're often deeply attuned to our energy, and they can read our nervous systems, okay? They can read that energy from our nervous systems. And when they feel us pulling away at all, okay, even just in our thoughts, their nervous system can interpret this as danger. It's like, oh, my safe person is leaving and I'm not safe, even though your body is there, okay? But they sense that pulling away. So then they cling more, right? They push more, they escalate, not because they want to make it harder, but because their body is fighting separation, right? And the fear that comes up with separation. Okay, so number 5 for our kids is that bedtime is a series of demands that can trigger a PDA threat response. So most of us know this, right? Oh, time to brush your teeth, put on your pajamas, come to bed, do something calming, lights out now. So many demands, okay? So every step is a demand, right? So for a PDA nervous system that's wired to resist any sort of perceived control or pressure as a survival response, bedtime can feel like a constant stream of demands, and this can trigger their fight response where they start to argue or yell or refuse. It can trigger their flight response where they start to run away or they hide from you. It can trigger their freeze response where they kind of shut down or go blank, or they're not listening and they can't hear you, right? And then you think that they're not listening, but it's really their nervous system causing them to not really hear you. Or it can just be like sort of chaos energy, right? Which is fight flight energy, right? They get silly, wild behavior, or they get even more resistance. So again, this is nervous system survival and not willful obedience. So when we look at it from a nervous system lens, we can begin to start helping our kids to calm their nervous system in different ways. But we're not going to talk so much about how to help our kids in this because, I'm all about how to help the parents, because once you're in a place where you know how to help yourself with this challenge, your creativity comes out with how to then help your child. Okay. And some of you probably already have techniques, but the key is that those strategies to help your child help so much more when you're regulated. So let's talk about why parents struggle so much at bedtime first, okay? We need to talk about what's happening inside of you and your nervous system, because it's not just about your child's capacity, but it's also about yours, okay? So number one, by the end of the day, you're already running on empty. I can't tell you how many mothers that I coach feel this way, and myself as well, right? Bedtime is often happening after an entire day of managing meltdowns and challenges, navigating school or appointments or therapies, navigating the household, holding everyone's emotions, and trying to keep the house functional and getting a lot of stuff done, right? So the moment you have time, boom, you're running, you're off to the races trying to get as much done as possible, right? And by evening, your nervous system is understandably tired, overstimulated, and depleted, right? So you start moving towards the finish line at bedtime, the moment you finally get to stop, and your system speeds up a bit, right? Starts to rev up. It's okay, let's just get this done. If I can get them to sleep by 9, I'll have an hour to myself, right? So your child feels this time pressure and urgency in your body, even if you're smiling and saying all the right things, right? Your internal state is rushing, and that is what their nervous system responds to. Okay, so number 2, you've been overriding your own nervous system all day. Okay, so this is somewhat similar to number 1, but this is about how most parents of high needs kids spend the day in some mix of pushing past tired, right? Stuffing down tears or anger, trying not to lose it, constantly problem solving, holding it together. Okay, so overriding is a form of what's called functional freeze, okay, where outwardly you look calm and you're recruiting these ventral vagal social engagement behaviors. So you look calm on the outside, and you're acting calm, okay? But inside you're bracing and tight and stressed, okay? But you may not be aware that you're actually activated inside and having a stress response underneath. So this is important to become aware of, because oftentimes, like in functional freeze, there's this layer of numbness on top of the activation we're feeling inside, okay? And so we have this activation and this numbness on top trying to hold it down, and this burns a lot of energy and builds a lot of stress load, okay? It's like filling up that bathtub, so it's now ready to overflow, right? So pushing past tired the whole day and overriding already filled your bathtub to a certain point, and then now you're filling it up even more, that it's beginning to overflow. Okay, so by bedtime, you've already built up a big stress load. The bathtub is full. Your body has been in survival mode for hours with no breaks to let off steam or stress, and you're trying to hold it together one more time. Okay, so your child feels that you're not truly present. Okay, that you're trying to hold yourself together by a thread, and they don't feel fully safe in that energy. Their nervous system activates and pushes back, trying to get your real presence on board. Okay, so it's another important one to notice. And then number 3, controlling energy comes in, and then that's a sign you're not regulated. Okay, so when things feel out of control, it's normal to move into controlling energy, okay? But this is sympathetic fight, flight, and not true regulation, okay? So you might notice thoughts like, oh, okay, this needs to go a certain way. He has to be asleep by this time. If I don't get this right, tomorrow will be a disaster. Okay, this controlling energy is a sign that your system is in sympathetic fight flight and not true regulation. So from the outside, controlling energy can look like, tightening or deepening your voice, right? Sounding more serious, or getting more rigid with the routines, needing to get it done faster, right? Bargaining, threatening, or pleading, okay? Trying to force calm instead of, trying to force calm or compliance, okay? Instead of connection, instead of focusing on connection. So your PDA child's nervous system, it mirrors that threat energy back to you, which is why the more we try to control, the more they often escalate. Okay, number 4 for you, what happens in your nervous system is that bedtime can trigger the deeper wound of my needs don't matter. Okay, so after a whole day of tending to everyone else, bedtime often becomes the moment your nervous system realizes, I haven't had a second to myself. Okay, so this can stir up deeper layers of pain, like this feeling of no one cares and that no one cares that I'm exhausted. Okay, I never get a break. My needs always come last. Okay, these aren't just thoughts, they're often echoes of old childhood experiences where your needs were not seen or prioritized. Okay, it's hard to be with that raw vulnerability. So what happens? Instead, it triggers a protective response that comes in the flavor of anger, impatience, or wanting to shut down or run away. Okay, so now bedtime isn't just about getting your child to sleep, it's also touching deep emotional wounds of the past inside of you. Okay, and then number 5, your frontal lobe is tired and has less access to regulation. Okay, so research shows that our prefrontal cortex, which is the higher thinking brain, right? The part of the brain that helps us reason, empathize, and regulate, is less available when we're tired. And by evening, your thinking brain is offline more easily. And your survival brain, your amygdala or your limbic system, can become louder and take over more easily if you're triggered. So it's harder to pause and reframe or access any of your tools in the evenings. Okay, so when your child throws the soap bottle or starts running around, your system doesn't have as much capacity to say, oh, okay, this is a stress response, right? You don't have as much frontal lobe capacity to downgrade the survival activation. So you end up being taken over by your survival system, okay? Which can then make everything feel more urgent and overwhelming because your brain is already exhausted. Okay, and then number 6 of what can be happening in you is that your nervous system and your child's nervous system need opposite things. Okay, so this is the interesting thing. At bedtime, your nervous system often wants quiet, solitude, disconnection, and rest, right? We've had a whole day of stimulation, and you want to go more inside and just disconnect and have more quiet and solitude, and all of this makes sense, okay, for many of us. But I also want to mention, for many of us, the pattern of withdrawing at night. So it's good for you to really look into this and feel into this pattern of withdrawing at night. It may go back to our own childhood, okay? So maybe nighttime was a time when we felt alone, right? So we learned to withdraw or numb out because it was too hard to be with emotions surfacing from the day. And our brain is predictive, right? It learns those patterns and it goes into these predictive patterns automatically without our conscious awareness. So, but your child's nervous system, okay, they have a different need, okay? They sense you're withdrawing, right? Which then can trigger them, but their need is opposite at night because of their fear of separation. They need more connection, more co-regulation, more proximity, and reassurance that they are safe and not alone. Okay, so the moment that you are instinctively pulling away is the exact moment they are reaching for you. Okay, so 2 very real, very valid nervous system needs collide, right? And no wonder it feels so big. So understanding all of this gives us a clearer picture of why bedtime feels so overwhelming. And once we can see the patterns for what they are, we can begin to support ourselves in ways that shift the whole experience. Okay, so let's get into what can you do to support both nervous systems, right? It's not just about supporting them, it's also about supporting you. So how do you care for your nervous system so that you have the capacities to support your child's nervous system? So I want to walk you through the practices that have helped me and that I've seen that has helped many other parents to make bedtime feel lighter and safer and more connected, because bedtime really is a time to connect, okay? And that can nourish both of you. So I want you to understand these are not fixes and they're not perfect solutions. You can adapt them to what works for you, but they're gentle practices that increase awareness, because first we need to increase awareness, right, of what's happening in ourselves and find ways to release stress load and then create more possibilities for connection with our child so that it can nourish both of our nervous systems. Okay, so the first thing you can do is build awareness of how you push through your day. Okay, it is so important for you to notice how you mount stress load in your day and then you're waiting for bedtime to just collapse. Okay, and instead we want to change this pattern. Okay, we don't want to be going the whole day not noticing our state and then bedtime becomes like we hit a wall and we just want the day to end. So if you can start to notice earlier in your day when you are mounting stress load and overriding and pushing through, okay? And then you need, at that point, you need to pause and give yourself a few moments of a break to just come back to total rest and relaxation and release stress load. Okay, so some of the signs can be that your body is mounting a lot of tension and getting tighter as the day goes on. Okay, or when you feel tired, like you need a bit of a break, your mind just says, oh, just get this next thing done, right? Override, override. I've done that many times. Or when you find yourself constantly like doing and rushing without any breaks, right? This is often overriding the small cues of rest that we get and that are needed to help with releasing stress load and regenerating for the next challenge. You know, otherwise, if you're running around in this like low-grade sympathetic all day, you're mounting a ton of stress load, okay? And remember that bathtub, right? It's going to overflow at night then. So when you feel like you're forcing yourself to do things, even when you feel some need for rest, okay? This is when you want to experiment with 2 to 5 minute micro breaks throughout your day, okay? So come out of your head and into your body. Okay, feel your feet on the floor, because when you feel your feet on the floor, it neurocepts to your brain that you're in the present moment, okay? So we're coming out of our heads, right? Where we live like in the past or the future. Feel the feet, feel your feet on the ground and the sensations of that. Notice where you're holding tension, maybe unclench your jaw. A lot of us hold our jaw in tight, and just relax your shoulders. Okay, take a few longer, slower breaths and exhales, especially. Make the exhale longer than the inhale. And let your body register, I'm allowed to pause. I'm allowed to pause. Okay, so these tiny resets, you think they're simple and they don't do much, but they do. Okay, they really help prevent stress from stacking so high, which ends up spilling over at bedtime. So that is one of the top things to do. The second thing is to become aware of and catch is you catch the moment that you start to rev up about bedtime, okay? So where you start to like worry about the time, right? So notice when your inner clock turns on, right? Oh, it's already 7:30. We're behind schedule. If they don't sleep soon, tomorrow will be awful. Okay, this is often the moment your nervous system shifts into future-focused anxiety and pressure, okay? So when you catch it, you gently bring yourself back to the present with regulation tools like as I mentioned before, you ground your feet, feel your feet on the ground or feel your sit bones in the chair to help your brain feel more presence, okay? Or you do some orienting, what's called orienting, where you look around the room slowly and you notice and name 5 to 10 things that you see. That helps you come back to the present moment. Okay, and then breathing. Do a couple of minutes of breathing where you have a longer exhale than an inhale. So breathe for 4 counts in through the nose and breathe for 6 counts out through the nose slowly, right? This stimulates relaxation. So you're reminding your body, I am here now. This moment is what I can be with. Okay. And from here, you can meet your child, not your fears about tomorrow. And number 3, tend to the deeper wound of nobody cares about my needs. Okay. When bedtime stretches on, it can trigger the very young part that believes my needs don't matter. And instead of abandoning yourself in that moment, see if you can acknowledge it. Of course, I feel this way. I've been giving all day. And then practice micro moments of self-care, meeting yourself right where you are. So maybe you need a drink of water. So take a drink of water if you're thirsty. Most of us don't even notice like the little needs that our body has, right? We override those, like going to the bathroom when you need to, right? Or maybe putting a hand on your heart or giving yourself a gentle hug just to feel like you're supporting yourself. And maybe even using compassionate self-talk and silently tell yourself, I see you, your needs matter too, right? So you're being with the younger, vulnerable part of you, and you're just speaking to yourself in this kind, compassionate way so you can feel supported and like your needs matter too. So a big part of this journey is learning to meet our needs in small, doable ways in the middle of our life, okay? Not only in escape or separation. And I teach this a lot because a lot of us think that we need to like have a big long break to actually feel relaxed, but you can, or to give ourselves what we need. But in our lives with our high needs kids, it's important to find the small doable ways in the middle of our life, okay? Not just in escaping or being separated from our kids. Okay, so number 4, loosen your attachment to how the evening should go. Okay, this is the big one, okay? If there is a rigid plan in your mind or a specific time you really have to hold to or a specific sequence of events or emotional outcome or specific behavior you're expecting, your PDA child will feel that pressure. Okay, so ask yourself, can I hold this routine a bit more loosely? Can I be flexible with the order or timing even? Can I focus more on connection than on completion? That's a huge one, okay? I've often found that when I have no agenda and I am more genuinely present, then bedtime flows much more easily. When I'm clinging to how it should go or to the timing, my child's nervous system reads that energy and activates. Okay, so number 5, make bedtime about connection and help with the separation that they're feeling by pointing to the next moment of togetherness. Okay, so because bedtime is a separation, you could help your child's brain and body feel safer by orienting them to the next point of connection instead of leaving them alone with the fear of being apart. So you may say things like, I will dream about you tonight. I'll come check on you while you're sleeping. In the morning, I can't wait for us to play that game together. Or when you wake up, I'll be right here. Okay, so this helps their nervous system shift focus from loss of connection to instead reunion, the next point of connection, right? So instead of you're leaving me, they can focus their brain on we'll be together again soon, or I'm always connected to you. Okay. At the same time, remember that your child may need to release some pent-up stress before they can settle. So that's really important. When you are connecting with them, can you help them to release some of that pent-up stress, right? A bit of silly play, some movement, some tears or big feelings they might have. Can you give some room for that to help them release it? Okay. And then if you notice yourself getting pulled into stress again, the practice is to keep coming back to the present moment, to your body, to your breath, and the felt sense of connection between you, okay? This is so important. Like, let that connection nourish you as much as it nourishes your child, okay? That's so important because it doesn't have to be all about like getting this task done to, do everything for your child to get them to bed. it can become about this really nourishing, regulating moment of connection for both of you that fills both of you up. Okay, so there's benefits for you in this routine too. So can you see that, right? Okay, and number 6, after your child is asleep, regulate before you numb out. Okay, so once your child is finally in bed, it's so natural, and so many parents do this, right? You want to scroll on your phone or watch Netflix or mentally check out. Okay, there's no shame in that. Numbing is also a survival strategy so that we don't have to feel the stress or emotions beneath the surface. Okay, but if you can, try offering your nervous system a few minutes of intentional regulation first so it can come out of survival mode. Okay, so notice your state. Okay, am I wired, collapsed, numb, overwhelmed, still a bit agitated? Like, how are you feeling after you put your child to bed? And then do one small thing to support yourself. Okay, maybe a few slow breaths or some stretching. I love to do this before bed as I do a lot of stretching. I do some joint rolls. I do gentle shaking off of my body just to help release some of the tension and stress from my body. Then I give myself cues of safety, like giving a self hug or some kind of self touch. I will hand on my heart or my stomach or rub my tummy. I'll give myself some support, and then I lie down and I'll feel the support underneath me, because if I can feel the felt sense of support all along my back, this helps signal safety to my brain, okay? Because it feels like a felt sense of support, right? So these small practices can help you release excess stress energy, help you sleep more deeply, and signal to your body that it's finally safe to rest, okay? And it also helps you to build capacity over time for the next day's challenges, okay? And that's what you want to do so you don't get to burnout. So instead of carrying all of the evening's stress into the night, into your sleep, you're slowly teaching your system, okay, I can release this, I can repair, I can start again. Okay, so perhaps now this is an opportunity for a new way to see bedtime, right? So if bedtime is a minefield in your home, it doesn't mean that you're a bad parent or that your child is too much, okay? It means that there's two nervous systems, both carrying a lot, both wired for survival in their own ways, are crashing into each other at the end of a long day, okay? Your child isn't trying to make life harder, and you're not weak or failing because you're triggered, okay? You're both doing the best you can with the capacity you have. And as you begin to understand what's really happening under the surface, in your body and in theirs, right, in our nervous systems, bedtime can slowly shift from a nightly battleground into a place where you see the patterns with more compassion, okay, and you support yourself earlier in the day, okay, you soften your expectations, or you orient both of you towards connection and safety, okay? So this is the most important thing I feel like of bedtime, is really, really making it about connection, if you can, and now letting it nourish both of your nervous systems, okay? So one bedtime at a time, you're not just surviving the night, you're quietly rewiring how both of your nervous systems experience separation, connection, and rest. So if this helped you in any way, please like, please comment, please share. I'd love to hear from you. And I hope that this makes your bedtime a little bit easier.